Hello, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer, the board game review Excuse me, it's just Hey, my handkerchief, it's dancing. My handkerchief is dancing. Do you want to know why it's dancing? It's got a little boogie in it. A lot of people think that it's saliva, but it's not. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea from GMT Games. In Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea from GMT Games, 1 to 6 players will take on one of the various nations, one of the various empires that existed in the ancient Mediterranean Empire. You can be the Carthaginians, you can be the Trojans, you can be the Phoenicians, you can be the Gauls, you can be the Romans, you can be the Egyptians. He's got some Gaul roaming around like that after he gypped me. Play on words. Essentially, the board is a map of the Mediterranean, with the various locations for the different factions to begin. Now, every player simply has a number of discs. I think they each have about 30 discs of their own color. And what you're going to do during the game is you're going to go ahead and set up, depending on a specific scenario you might play, which again may depend on player count, you're going to go ahead and you're going to set up a number of discs in a number of configurations. Now, all things being equal, 1 disc on the board in a territory represents a camp, 2 discs represents a settlement, and 3 discs represents a city. Now, at sea, 1 disc represents like a fishing fleet, 2 discs represent a fleet. You cannot have 3 discs at sea. The game takes place over 4 epochs, and each epoch is going to have a series of stages that you repeat until you trigger the epoch phase, which ends that epoch. Now, each player in turn is going to go through their first phase. This is the growth phase. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the steps here, but I will tell you that essentially during the growth phase, you're going to take a number of discs from your supply, place them on your ready portion of your player sheet, depending on certain factors of what you already have on the board. You're going to go ahead and kind of put them in your pool through acquisition here. You'll also have a resettlement step where you can take some cubes away from some discs away from your cities, put them in the ready spot, and then you're going to have the deployment phase, where essentially you're deploying these discs to the board. Now, you can chain, you can kind of put one here and then put one there. You can put one anywhere you want, and then you can start, stacking on them, and you can make your settlements here, make your cities here, and you can grow your civilization in this way. After each player is done with their growth phase, you move to the card phase. Now here, each player is going to play a card one at a time until a player passes. Once everybody's passed, then you move on. But during this card phase, you're playing cards from the Fate deck. Now the Fate deck has various cards, and a lot of them are going to do things like give you talents, which essentially are another disc, but you put them in your talents space instead of your ready space, which means they're kind of like a currency, and you can spend them for different things. You're also going to play cards that add barbarians to the board. You're going to be adding black discs to various spaces that will kind of contest with the owners of those spaces for that space. You may also end up placing white discs, which are allies at this time, and you may also do all sorts of other fun and kooky things, like playing bad tricks on people, removing their discs from the board, or rearranging discs, or essentially just screwing other people in different ways with the cards you're playing. Now, some of the cards will have different letters on them. For instance, if a card has an N, that means negate. Essentially, you can play that card to negate specific cards that come out. So if somebody plays a card you don't like, you can go ahead and play the negate card, and that card doesn't matter. But somebody then could play another negate card, which negates your negation, and the original card goes through. There's also investment cards. Essentially, these have a little eye on it. And what they mean is you can set that next to your board, and at different times, usually during the growth phase, it'll give you certain advantages, certain little things you can do to help grow your civilization. Now, during the card phase, you can also build a wonder. Essentially, you can build one of the 7 wonders that is just to the side of the board, and you can do this by spending a combination of 5 different resources. Now, your resources are discs from the board that you can remove. They are discs that you can remove from your talent section, or they are cards you can discard from your hand. 2 of them have to come from the board. 2 of them have to be discs you remove from the board, but the rest can be made up, the other 3 can be made up of any of those combinations of resources. When you buy a wonder, essentially you put the card next to you, you get whatever its advantages are. Usually you put some of your discs on it that can trigger abilities as you remove them, and then you place the wooden block of that wonder in whatever space you want to build it in that you control. When the card phase is done, you have the competition phase. Now, essentially, you're going to resolve competitions going from the northeast to the southwest of the board. And you're going to have competition in any space where there are more than 1 disc. Because when you're placing those discs, you can place them in areas that already have other people's discs in them or barbarian discs in them. And now you have to resolve who is going to get that area. Now, the first thing you're going to do during competition is, if you still have cards in your hand you want to play that have a C in it, that C means competition. You can play it for competition. This is usually going to give you more discs in your territory, or it may give you allies, which are the white discs in your territory. It may reduce the number of enemy faction discs in your territory. But then what you're going to go through is, after you've played that and you've resolved all the cards that are played or any wonder effects that may be there, you go ahead and you start removing discs almost on a one-for-one basis, one at a time. First these factions, then your factions, and you go down, and whoever has discs left then, they are the winner of that, and they maintain control over that area. However, if you just get down to 1 disc each, it remains contested and neither side gets control. Negation cards may also be played during the competition phase to negate somebody else's competition card. Next, you have the reckoning phase, and there are several little things that occur during this phase as well. You're going to check some C zones, see if you've got control over certain C zones. You're also going to check for victory points. Generally, victory points are going to be tracked by how many cities you have at this time. There are other factors that will play into it as well. And then you're going to kind of try to establish turn order. You're going to see who has the most cities to the least cities is going to be turn order. If there's ties, then you're going to look at some other factors as well, but to determine turn order from that point forward. There's a few other things that go on here. For instance, there's a kind of epoch sudden death. Essentially, you draw a card, and if anywhere on that card during the second phase, if it's got a 2 on it, then you immediately go to the epoch. And during the third phase there, if it's got a 3 on it, you would go to the end of the epoch. Then you have to resolve the end of the epoch. But you also, too, at this time, draw cards. Now, you're going to draw cards, generally speaking, 3. If you've got, I think, 4 more cities, you draw another one. And then you can actually spend talents to draw more cards. You can also spend the talents to keep your discs from being removed from the board. That's another use of the talents there. But here, you can use them to draw cards. Now, as you're drawing cards one at a time, you may have a card that comes up that says Event. Now, if you get an event card, that is resolved immediately before anyone else draws. You have to resolve that event. It could be a big thing, could be a small thing, but you have to resolve it, and then that event card will be set aside, and you'll draw another card. Now, if you did end the epoch, you're going to look at the card number that was on that card, and it will tell you, essentially, kind of give you a condition that's going to happen, be in play, a rule that's going to be in play for the next epoch. Then you go ahead, you set the epoch marker back to 1, and you begin your next turn. So players go around and around like this until they reach the end of the scenario, and then at the end of the scenario, you check the victory point track. Whoever has the most victory points wins Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. So there is a lot more going on to Ancient Civilizations of the Inner Sea. This is just kind of a brief overview, but there's a ton of other stuff going on here as well. Each faction has kind of unique abilities. The Wonders, of course, have unique abilities. And there's a lot of different cards that do a lot of different things, both event cards and regular fate cards. So there's a ton of stuff going on in this game. First of all, I just want to mention, so the guys behind this game were also, it was kind of some of the team behind Hitler's Reich. And, you know, I reviewed Hitler's Reich, I don't know, about a year or so ago, and it was not a good experience for me. I did not have a good experience with Hitler's Reich. And, yeah, you know, I think they came out with some updated rules, and I keep saying I want to go back and give it another shot, and I'm sure I will at some point. But I thought this one looked good, and I kind of wanted to give these guys another chance. I wanted to see, well, okay, maybe that was just... I mean, everybody can have a fluke here and there. I wanted to see if this worked. And I don't think it's everybody's the same, but a lot of the designers are the same on it. And So and frankly, I like kind of Mediterranean ancient civilization games. I think it's just a fun realm to play in. I like civilization building games just in general, and it looks beautiful. I mean, the game is just gorgeous map. You know, the discs are simple units with the discs, but I mean it's kind of an abstract in a way. But it's beautiful looking. I really like the look of the game, and I like the theme of the game. The question is, do you like the way the game plays? Well, first of all, I will say this: rulebook's a lot better than Hitler's Reich. The rulebook here is decent. It's good. It gets you the information. A few little things there and there we were kind of looking at, but I think we found everything we needed okay. But generally speaking, it's a much better, clearer rulebook. And what I love that they did here is they give each player, there's 6 player aids with all the steps on them. I mean, this is perfect. They knew this is something, there's so much going on, each player needs one of those. They put it in there. I would have dinged this hard if there was only like 1 or 2 player aids. But no, everybody gets player aid. That is brilliant. And I'm so glad they did that. That was awesome. The gameplay itself, now, as I say, I'll tell you some of the criticisms I have. The biggest one is this is a long game. Now, I just played the 6-player game, and basic scenario, it's long. This is a big, massive game with 6 players. I want to try it again. It's some smaller player counts, but it's a long game. Just know that the word slog kind of has that negative connotation in that it's a bad game. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a long game. Be aware of that. There's another thing, too. Now, at the bottom of each of the fate cards, after they're played, there's what they call the legend. And the legend is essentially, it says what happens to that card. Some cards get set aside. Some are taken, I think, some are put in the back of the box. Some of them, it says reshuffle immediately. Well, when a lot of those cards are coming out, you're reshuffling quite a bit. There's a lot of reshuffling. The fate deck is massive. So there's a lot of reshuffling of that fate deck. And that's a little tedious when you're reshuffling as often as you will be in this game. I wasn't a huge fan of that. Long game, a lot of shuffling. Other than that, I really enjoyed this game. I really like this one, quite frankly, a lot more than I thought I was going to, based on the team behind it, and just the fact that it was so long. It was super fun, though, and I'll tell you why it's fun. This is one of the meanest games you'll play. It is so mean because you're playing those fake cards that completely screw people over. That completely, they're building up for war. People play those cards and then boom, suddenly you got a bunch of barbarians in your back, or the discs that you're hoping to kind of infringe upon somebody else. They're leaving, but it's never so brutal and it's never so arbitrary that it feels like it's completely undermining your strategy. Now, sometimes it does to an extent, but you still feel like you're in control. You still feel like you're in the driver's seat, but these problems keep popping up, and just when you're trying to confront one threat, you have another one popping up from an unexpected quarter, and it's mean. And what I mean by mean is when you play those cards, everybody's laughing. It's like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And everyone is laughing, and we were constantly laughing while we're playing these cards. And then somebody goes, oh, I got this great card I'm going to trump with, and they play that card, and they're like, yeah. And then the other guy says, nope, they've got a negate card. And they're like, oh. And then somebody else says, nope, and they play the negate on that negate card, and it goes through, and it is so much fun. This is just a blast. Like I said, I got to play a shorter game. I got to play at a lower player count. There's a solitaire version of this game. I don't know that I'd want to play it solitaire. I may try it at some point, but personally for me, the joy I was getting out of this game was from the interaction with other players. That's to me what made this game super mega awesome. And it is. I think this game's super mega awesome. I really like this. Probably one of the top games of 2019 I played. I don't know that it's right at the top, but it's up there. I had a lot more fun with this game than I was expecting to. It was just a pleasant surprise. Now, not everybody had the same experience that I did. For some people, the length was a bit too much for them, and some maybe thought it was a little too mean. So it wasn't for everybody in my group, but I think for most of us, we really got a kick out of it. And what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's necessarily going to be a game for everybody. Certainly the length in and of itself is something that's going to be off-putting for a lot of people. And again, too, some people don't like that meanness. And they like to have a strategy and be able to kind of methodically work it out just by eyeballing the board and knowing their strengths and their enemy's strengths. They don't like kind of the chance that comes with the card play. For me, that's what this game's about, and it's fun. It was just it was just good. At times, it did seem like the growth phase, it took a little while to get through, and these other phases are like, okay, this step, this step, this step. And there was a little bit of tediousness, I will grant you that. But for me, it was all about that card play and that card section, and then kind of building up and playing off that. And then the combat was actually pretty fun because it was... it's deterministic, which normally I don't like, but you can mitigate that with the cards and wonders, and you don't know when the barbarians are coming in and allies are coming in, and so I like that. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Game of Thrones, the board game combat, where again it's deterministic, but you've got cards that mitigate it, so I really, really like that. I have fun with the combat here. Thought that was pretty cool. I liked how, and all the factions, like I said, they got individual player powers, so there's little things. They do play a little bit differently. I would have maybe liked to seen maybe even more difference in how they play, but as it is, it's fine. It's cool. And I really liked the fact that you have... The discs are pretty much everything, but they're used in different ways. You have them in your pool, but then you also have them in your ready area. Then you have them in your talent area, and then you may have some on an investment card. Or you may have some on a wonder card, and of course you've got them on the board. So they're units, but they're currencies. But I also like, too, how your cards are a currency. Your cards are a resource. You're playing cards, and sometimes you're getting rid of cards to build wonders, but maybe at other times you're playing cards that make other people get rid of their cards or lose cards, or even maybe swap cards or swap hands and stuff. And to me, it was just fun. And I know it sounds a little crazy, a little too random. It's not. There is chance, but it's still just so much fun. I got a huge kick out of this game. A great civilization building game, in my opinion. Really a lot of fun. Recommendation for the discriminating gamers: if you like good civilization building games, you don't mind some meanness, I think you're going to get a really big kick out of this. Buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and as the snot said to the nose, I gotta run. Really? Are we really doing snot jokes now? Seriously? That's the best you can come up with? I considered going to Juilliard.
Please somebody help me on my feet again. And I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
You know, there is nothing more important than the people. Ah! Sean! Why?
You knew what I was when you asked me to review board games with you.